Welcome to the Creative Movement Podcast with your host, Ross Middleton.
Hey, we've got a great interview lined up for you today. We'll be interviewing Pastor Brad Schmidt, the pastor of City Church in Fort Lauderdale, and Pastor Isaac Frere, the pastor of the Font in North Lauderdale. And they are working specifically in the space of vocation and equipping pastors in the Church United ecosystem around the idea of work as being sacred and how to equip the people in their churches to understand the sacredness of what they do. So I hope you enjoy this conversation between myself, my two friends, Isaac and Brad. All right, so what's up, everybody? I'm here with the homies, Brad and Isaac, who's
yes, sir.
Like the Renaissance man. Isaac probably has more brain power than me and Brad combined.
What about me? What am I?
What are you? I don't know. You're the kid that rode the short bus, maybe.
Oh, man.
So tell me about you guys real quick. Brad, Isaac, how did you guys end up here? What do you do?
Yeah, so I'm the pastor at City Church, Fort Lauderdale. I actually grew up here in downtown Fort Lauderdale. And
you're the unicorns that
I am.
They speak of.
I am. One of the few natives. Only left for a couple years to go to college at Florida State University. And
I think that's the greatest university in the world, right?
Is it?
Yeah, I think that's
Is it?
No,
right, Isaac.
no, not at all. No, not at all. Blasphemy.
Went to UM.
Blasphemy.
But, that's another story. So yeah, came down after Florida State and yeah, helped start a church.
Cool.
That I'm pastoring now.
Awesome.
So I'm the black unicorn. I am
Nice.
also a native. I'm just black. I happen to be black. Pastor as well. Just launched a church over in Fort Lauderdale called The Font. We started off as an online church, and now we fully metastasized into a church community. That's probably the wrong word to use, right?
Anyway, used for cancer.
Yeah. That's what I hear.
Probably a better word.
But Florida native as well. Fort Lauderdale native. Spent some time away at the University of Miami. Taught there for about 9 years, then came back locally. Just felt a call to minister here and to pastor here. So here we are.
Sweet. Well, I wish, honestly, that there were more things that we could talk about, but we're going to focus specifically on what you guys are doing. And in the last episode, you guys heard Eddie Copeland talk about Church United and what we're doing here in Broward County. And one of the 4 pillars that we have here as part of Church United is to talk about how to impact the business world and to bring the kingdom of God into the business world. And so you guys have started, kind of one aspect. I know there's some other people that are doing some other things here locally to help reach business leaders and disciple them. But I want to talk to you guys about specifically Made To Flourish. So tell me a little bit about Made To Flourish.
Yeah, I'll start. Made To Flourish, it's a national network, so there are, I believe, 20 some odd cities that have a Made To Flourish network there, and we're now one of them. Fort Lauderdale is now a network, and it's connecting Sunday faith to Monday work. It's resourcing pastors and ministry leaders to disciple parishioners in all of life, which, of course, includes where we spend the majority of our time, which is at work. So that's what Made To Flourish does. It brings them together, and right now it's looking like an every other month gathering, a speaker, a lunch, best practices, how to disciple people, how to incorporate best practices even into your worship services that communicate to the people that come that we care about your work.
Cool. Isaac, you have a unique, not necessarily straight business, but a unique educational background. So help share with us how that connects into what Made To Flourish is. What you're doing.
Sure. I came from an academic background. Got my PhD in economics. Spent about 9 years teaching over at the University of Miami. Did a lot of research. Worked as well in the economic consulting business, where we spent most of our energy in establishing what we call macro impact analyses for
And
construction
that is for those of us that are less educated.
Yeah, what is that?
So essentially, what we do is we say, okay, well, if you have a project or an idea or something you'd like to do in the community or in the city, let's estimate what the economic value of that is in the city. So it's essentially what we call a macro regional impact analysis to determine whether or not it's even worth the investment. So you'll find that a lot of public clients are interested in these sort of things as they're developing policy and things of that nature, determine whether or not, this is a project that's worth moving forward in. And so did a lot of work there, also served as an expert analyst and witness for bankruptcy hearings and things of that nature. Again, those are mostly macro sort of analyses or labor analyses and that sort of thing. So did a lot of consulting work there. And taught for 9 years, did a lot of research, traveled. Most of my research is in growth and demographics, but did a lot of macro and business stuff as well. And I think as I transitioned out, the question was, well, where does this apply in the faith space? How does this apply in our ecclesial context? And what I find is that there is a disconnect there, right? Where economics is kind of seen as this sort of really methodological, mathematical, analytical study that doesn't apply to anything in your life, right? When you say economics, the first thing people say is, I hated that class, right? That's the first thing, like, oh yeah, I hated that, And I think what's missing there, and I think it's missing as well in the academic world, is we fail to connect the fact that economics is about interaction. It's about people. It's about how we connect and how we interact with each other. And so on a deeper level, again, this might sound a little biased, but economics is everywhere. Even what we're doing now is economics, right? And so if you want to learn about people, understand behaviors and interactions, then study economics. It's what it's all about. It's less about money than it is about people.
I don't have a PhD in economics, but I did read Freakonomics a few years ago. And
Nice.
That came out, so.
Nice. That's good.
That's my baptism into economics.
There you go.
All right. So why is reaching businesses essential for a gospel city movement?
I've thought a lot about that. I think the text I go back to often is from Jeremiah 29, where the prophet tells the people of God that you're in Babylon, and you're going to be in Babylon, this pagan city, a long time. And to I think the surprise of God's people, the wisdom, the word was not retreat. It wasn't isolate. It also wasn't assimilate and be just like them. It was to love them, to invest in the city, to seek its welfare, to pray for the city, to seek its flourishing, because if it flourishes, so will you. So I think that's important for churches to see that your spiritual formation of your congregation is actually tied to the well-being of the city and how well the city's doing. And of course, I think business is a huge component of what makes up the flourishing of a community. How well people are being treated, if people are making good products, if innovation is taking place in the community. So I think that's why it's part and parcel to a gospel movement.
That's good.
Okay. Why do you guys think that there seems to be a disconnect sometimes between being a Christian and running a business, or everybody's favorite Christian business, Chick-fil-A? I like to call it the Christian chicken.
The holy chicken.
Pause for a moment of respect.
Moment of silence
for Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
But why does there seem to be a disconnect between connecting what we hear on Sundays, implementing it into our businesses, and then doing that Monday through Friday during the week?
I think part of it is our teaching. I don't think that we spend enough time or effort or energy teaching a proper theology of work to our congregations. The common thing that you hear from the members of at least of my church is, I feel like I do God's work when I do outreach, or I feel like I'm doing God's work by giving towards what we call the spiritual professionals, right? The pastors and the ones who actually do ministry. And I think that the other thing as well is exposure, right? We haven't exposed them to this idea that your work is meaningful, that your work is holy, and that your work is ministry. And so I think it starts there. And I think that's why Made to Flourish is such an important element of what we're doing here in the faith workspace, is to say, how do we equip these pastors now to teach their congregations and instruct their congregations on why their work is meaningful and why their work is ministry.
Yeah.
So.
Dorothy Sayers had a line in one of her essays where she said, what the church typically tells the carpenter is not to get drunk on Saturdays and show up to church on Sundays, when what the church should be telling the carpenter is that your first Christian duty is to make good tables and sell them at a fair price.
Yeah.
And what is it? What good is it if you're going to church all the while insulting God with bad carpentry? And that's always stuck with me. And I think that's a message that needs to get out and needs to get into the pews, that your work matters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So give me an example of what this looks like practically for a business leader that's listening to this, or a pastor that's trying to equip a business leader. What does it look like to have a Christian worldview or a Christian ethic regarding business? Like make it nuts and bolts. Like, what does that look like Monday to Friday in a business? How does that help?
I'll take a stab at it. I think of a friend of mine who owns a coffee shop. So he's a business owner. He's also a Christian. And I think he's taken this worldview that I'm in Babylon. But I belong to God, and I am called to seek the flourishing of this community that I'm in. And so what does the city need? And so, South Florida, for instance, is kind of a very transient place, lots of isolation. A lot of people are lonely and lack community. And so he says, part of me seeking the well-being of this city is building this coffee shop around community. And the greatest joy I have as a business owner is being that person in someone's life that they can go to, that they know. He just told me actually yesterday, and I didn't know this, but there's someone in this community who goes to his coffee shop every single day, and this guy, this business owner, is the trustee on his living will, because he's the only person that's known by this guy, which is incredible, and
sad at the same time.
It's sad, and this, my friend, doesn't even really know this guy all that well, but knows him enough, right? Wow. Enough that he holds that space in his life, and I think, to me, that's a picture of a Christian saying, I am for the well-being of this community. Yep. I live for other people.
Yep, creating jobs, creating a place for people, hopefully to get a good livable wage, which in South Florida is a little bit higher than it is in other places.
Yep.
So how do you guys see this contributing to the overall movement? The Church United movement is business is one of the 4 pillars of what it is that we're doing. How do you guys see this contributing to the overall movement that's happening here in South Florida?
Okay, so the overarching plan for Church United is to tip the spiritual scale. That is to see, our population of evangelicals grow from 3% to 6% to 9%. Now, if we want to see revival, gospel transformation, it's going to require us to tap in or to touch on all the important aspects of our culture, of society, of the economy. And so when we think about the economic space or the commerce space or the business space, we see it as one of the most influential spaces as it relates to a gospel movement. So if we want to see gospel influence in our city, then we must influence the influencers.
Yep.
And so we believe that this space is a space of substantive influence, and so we should go in there and minister the gospel to it.
Yeah.
Why do you think some pastors seem to not to be able to connect to the business world? It seems like there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's that sacred secular dichotomy that unfortunately not just parishioners fall into, that what the pastor does is real ministry, and what I do just supports it. That old view that says my job is to work to make enough money to give to the church, right? Which is a real kind of diminishing, small view of the biblical doctrine of work. And I think, unfortunately, there are plenty of pastors who see themselves as separated from the business community. And, for instance, the last Made to Flourish gathering we just had, we had a pastor who was kind of the expert speaking about how he broke through into the business community. And one of the big takeaways was he was saying to pastors, you are a business leader.
Yep.
The church is a business.
No, it's not, Brad. It's a spiritual organization.
brothers, we are professionals in a sense.
Yeah.
In a sense, I know. I said it.
I said it. When Eddie Copeland threw shade at Eugene Peterson. Now you're throwing shade at John Piper. So I mean, this is.
What did he say about Peterson?
Oh man, he was just talking about the how the message and all that kind of.
Eddie,
stuff.
we're going to talk later. later. But
I like this. I like going after the big dogs though in our little dinky thing here.
No, but we're running an organization that by its nature has a budget.
Absolutely.
Requires you to hire and fire and requires you to build and develop. And so that was a big takeaway from our last gathering is pastors, you know how to speak to the business community already because you do this every single day.
Yeah, that's great.
There's the power of exposure as well, right? Is you can't connect with something you're not exposed to. Mm-hmm. So if you're a pastor and all you do is show up on Sunday and preach a word and you go to the hospitals and just minister to the sick and the elderly and that's all you're exposed to, it's hard for you then to speak the market language. It's hard for you to connect with the experience of the parishioners who work every day in these marketplaces and business sectors and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I think part of it as well is exposure is, are we in that space? Yeah. Intimately involved with business leaders in that community.
Yeah. And for me, it's just been curiosity, like getting curious about industries I'm not familiar with. So coming down here in South Florida, huge yachting industry, a number of people in our church are in that industry. I didn't know much about it, but just reading blogs, reading articles, reading essays, reading as much as I can about the industry. So when I sit down with someone in that industry, I'm not an expert by any means, but I can kind of talk intelligibly and intelligently about the topic, and it just communicates an interest in what they do.
Sure. Yeah. Well, how did you guys get, we'll say, a heart for this? What was the genesis story for both of you guys?
For me, it started with, my transition out of academia. Mm-hmm. It started with, well, now that I'm here, I'm in this space. Why am I not seeing this applied here in the church space? Why do I see a disconnect there between, economic knowledge, business knowledge and ministry? And so for me, this has sort of been a saving grace in a sense. It's been an answer to a prayer. To say, hey, here is a structure, here's a foundation, here's a community that's actually asking the hard questions and trying to find solutions to them. Yeah. So this has been valuable for me. I don't know about you, Brad, but this is a big one for me.
I think I've grown up, so I'm a Presbyterian minister, and I think in my tradition and kind of who I've read over the years, there's just always been this emphasis on all of life discipleship, on this glorious biblical doctrine of work that shows work as a pre-fall institution that is, God himself is a manual laborer who gets his hands dirty in creation, makes us out of the dust of the ground, makes us in his image, and then tells us to get to work in the garden, to take the raw materials of creation, reorganize them in such a way that it produces good for others. And so reading, Martin Luther, who spoke a lot about just our work and the priesthood of all believers, and Dorothy Sayers to Tim Keller to all these influences in my life over the years have kind of made this a natural fit and expression for me as a minister, I would say.
Cool. Yeah. What do you think a win looks like for this organization in here in Fort Lauderdale and South Florida, Broward County? What does it look like for us to? Is it educating pastors that then take the word to their people in their churches, or is it mobilizing business people, or is it both, or what does it look like?
I think it's both. It's first what you said first, and second what you said second. Like first, a win is coming out of a Made to Flourish gathering for a local pastor going, that's a takeaway. That's something I can implement. And so, even for me, I know the win for me at this last Made to Flourish event is Bill Mitchell of Boca Lead spoke, and he spoke about breaking through to the business community. And he said something that stuck with me. He said, my job is to be the biggest cheerleader for my city, for the city of Boca
That was a
Raton.
great point. Yeah.
The biggest cheerleader. And I walked away going, am I the biggest cheerleader of Fort Lauderdale?
Yeah.
You know, am I going to my civic leaders and saying, I am for you?
Yep.
What do you need? You know, if I can partner with you, I will. What do you need? That was a takeaway. And I think the tip of the spear is kind of like my friend that I mentioned who owns that coffee shop. I think that's the tip of the spear. It's people in our churches who are now thinking distinctly Christian about their work.
Yeah, pastors who are actively engaged.
Yep.
To see pastors sharing stories about how they're now cheering on their members and how they're actively involved in having conversations as to how they find meaning in what they're doing, to look a little bit deeper and further into the value of their work and their institutions, their businesses, their organizations, to see it as ministry as well, I think is a win for me. Just seeing people say, hey, you know, we're learning more about what this is, what it means, why it's valuable, continuing the conversation. That's really what it's about.
Yeah. I think it would be obviously a beautiful thing when you have pastors that can talk the language of business, if you will, and at least read a few business books here and there. You know, I don't know about you guys. I love reading business books, and I think there's a whole lot that we in the vocational church world can learn from the business world, and hopefully vice versa when we do it well. But, you know, it's having some of those books out there, the good to greats, the built to last, some of those business books that have been really, really helpful, and, you know, even my own thinking. I don't know if you guys have any recommendations or things. You know, what would you want to tell a pastor? Hey, this is a great way to at least educate yourself a little bit, to familiarize yourself a little bit with some of the business world, some things resources that could help them.
I mean, Jim Collins is great. Go read a Seth Godin book.
Yep.
I'm reading some Gary Vaynerchuk right now, who's kind of this
who's
this kind of madman entrepreneur.
He is crazy, yeah.
Who's crazy, but who's always giving me good ideas and kind of pushing me. And I think there's plenty of those books out there. I think you just got to start somewhere. You know, there are so many amazing books like that and influences out there, and just be a voracious reader.
Yeah. I had a photographer member who had to sit down with him yesterday, and he was talking to me about a book that he just read called The E-Myth. I don't know if you're familiar with that book. Yeah, I've
read that.
And what was interesting is he went online and he checked it with me, and then after he checked it, he said, hey, look at this one comment. And it was, I don't know who the guy was, but he said, every church planter needs to read this book. Right?
I think
the
Andy
entrepreneur
Stanley
myth
actually
right?
says that I think he's made his whole staff read it 2 or 3 times.
The E-Myth?
I haven't read it.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
So it's a book called The Entrepreneur Myth. It's teaching what it means to be an entrepreneur, the difference between a businessman and an entrepreneur. I'm giving the synopsis like I read it, but he was kind of sharing the ideas in the book.
Yeah.
And he was presenting to me like, hey, this has been good for me, but I see this applying in our church. Like, how do we franchise? How do we brand? How do we, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? And then, we just went online just to, check it out. And then there it is. The first comment that I saw on Amazon was every church planter should read this book, right? So I think it's valuable for us as pastors to be able to speak the language.
That's good.
And to understand what it means to be an entrepreneur.
And that's exactly what Daniel did, right? In Babylon, is he could speak the language of it, and he wasn't intimidated by it. And I think, moving forward, especially in a very post-Christian South Florida and in America, Daniel's going to be a really great guide for us to bring the gospel into our culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so if someone wanted to catalyze this in their own city, if someone's listening in another city and they said, man, I would love to do this, I'd love to gather some pastors, how would they go about doing that?
MadeToFlourish.org. You can contact the organization. They're based out of Kansas City, and they are always looking to expand. I mean, it's been around for just a couple short years now, so they are in 20 some odd cities right now, but looking to expand. So MadeToFlourish.org would be the place to start. It's also where you can find out more about the organization, its vision, its values, how to get connected. You might find that there's already something happening in your area you didn't know about, so that would be the first place to go.
Cool. What about you guys, if people wanted to connect with you guys? I know Isaac's like a social media wizard over there, but if people wanted to connect with you guys or ask you some questions about it, how would they do that?
Follow me on Instagram, Isaac Frere.
The gram.
I'll also take emails. If you have any questions or any concerns, you can email me at isaacf@madetoflourish.org. isaacf@madetoflourish.org.
Yeah, and I'm Brad S. at madetoflourish.org.
All right. No social handles for you.
You can find me on the Facebook.com.
The Facebook.
Facebook.com.
On the Facebook.
You can find me on Insta.
Wasn't it called that like
on
20
Insta?
years ago?
It is. That was the original
The
name.
Facebook.
It was.
You guys
the
can find me on
Facebook.
MySpace.
You got a Zanga
High
blog.
five.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm on Facebook and I think that's it actually.
Cool.
I just got an Instagram account, but I haven't posted anything. How do I do that?
You don't say Instagram, you say IG.
IG?
Or
Yeah, you
the,
say
the
IG.
Gram.
Or
The
the
Gram?
Gram.
The
Yeah,
Gram.
yeah.
But
Okay.
it's owned by the Facebook.
The Facebook. Okay, I didn't know that. I'll Google more about that at google.com.
Google.com.
Or maybe
Dogpile.com. Is that around still?
or maybe I'll ask Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves. There you go.
Nice. What was it? Metacrawler? Remember that?
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out for a few minutes. Hope this is helpful for you. And God bless you. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Both those guys are so smart. They always help me learn and grow every time I'm around them. And what they're providing in the Church United ecosystem is vital to help equip pastors to then equip their people to understand the importance and the sacredness of whatever vocation that God has called them to. So I hope that you will go check out some of those links either at Made to Flourish, or you can follow them on Instagram or Twitter, or myself on Instagram or Twitter at jrossmiddleton. Would love to hear from you and wherever you are. God bless, and we will see you on the next episode.